Hello and welcome to the second video in our series, A Whole Bible, based on Chapter 6 of our book, Whole Bible Christianity. I'm Bruce Bertram. In this video we will look at the testing of Jesus in different instances and compare current church teaching on the subjects that he raises with what the Bible actually says. You might say they are a little different, just like the teachings were different between the rabbis and Jesus way back when. Did Jesus eliminate the law, or did he reinforce it? Let's find out. Jesus had a number of tests about the law given to him by Jewish leaders. 5 major tests were on signs, divorce, paying taxes, the greatest command, and the stoning of the adulterous woman. The tests were designed for him to fail, though. Leaders thought they had him trapped. But he surprised them with wise answers using the fulfilled law the way it was intended to be used. He stuck to the letter and the spirit better than they did. Indeed, Jesus filled the law up full as he said he would. He filled the law full of love for God, the love it was supposed to have in the first place. He was able to bring both the spirit and the letter together in a way that is obvious to anyone not blinded by hypocrisy and pride. The first test was a demand for a sign. Matthew 16:1, Mark 8:11, Luke 11:16. The religious leaders wanted a sign because Moses used some. The prophet that was to come, which Moses spoke about, was supposed to be like him. Deuteronomy 18:15 through 19. So the rabbis reasoned that if Jesus were the prophet, he would use similar signs. They should have reasoned that the prophet would be humble and hold to God's law completely, just like Moses did. This would in fact be more like Moses. Remember that Israel wanted signs from Moses too, but were never satisfied with them. They were not really interested in signs, ever, except maybe as a substitute for TV. Signs don't do anything to convert anybody. They sure didn't work with Israel, nor do they work now. How can a sign do anything for those who refuse to see? Worse, who see and refuse to obey. It's like a fireworks show where everybody oohs and ahs, but the end of the show is also the end of the impact. Jesus again skillfully goes to the heart of the matter. First, he says they couldn't properly interpret or obey a sign from God anyway. This is the biblical equivalent of blind in one eye and can't see out of the other, as my dad used to say. Second, he said that only the sign of Jonah would be given. Matthew 12:39, 16:4, Luke 11:29. Make a note for yourself here that the people of Nineveh repented at the mere preaching of Jonah. He didn't use any signs. Of course, signs were on display all around the leaders. Jesus was healing, casting out demons, and raising people from the dead left and right. However, they refused to act on the signs. They were like children sitting in the marketplace, singing to each other in the wisdom of the world. They wanted him to dance to their music. But Jesus doesn't dance like that for beans. To what then shall I compare the men of this generation, and what are they like? They are like children who sit in the marketplace and call to one another, and they say, "We played the flute for you, and you didn't dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not weep." For John the Baptist has come eating no bread and drinking no wine, and you say he has a demon. The Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and you say, "Behold, a gluttonous man and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners." Yet wisdom is vindicated by all her children. Luke 7:31 through 35. He wasn't going to give them the dog and pony show they wanted. Matthew 11:16, Luke 7:32. His wisdom, especially in the proper use of the law, was proven by all of his actions. If the leaders really wanted confirmation that Jesus was the prophet, there was plenty of evidence to go around. The refusal to jump when they said jump went a long way towards his arrest and false conviction. And no, signs have about as much chance of making hard-hearted people see as the United States Marine Band playing Stars and Stripes Forever has of making deaf people hear. Doing a miracle is related to asking for a sign. People want their senses stimulated with signs and miracles, but this is not the same as a softened heart. Is it better to do miracles, or just do what God says? The false prophet, coming soon to a government near you, will do all sorts of miracles to get people to worship the beast. He will be very successful for a while, because there are those who want any miracle except the miracle of changing a heart of stone to a heart of flesh. According to Jesus, many people who merely do miracles or signs will not enter his kingdom. The person acting on his word will enter. Now this could include miracles properly done. As it is written, many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name cast out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on the rock. Matthew 7:22 through 24. The one who performs a miracle but is lawless will have to depart. The one who did no miracles but does the will of God gets to enter. Later, Jesus will tell Thomas that a person who does not see yet believes, or acts on his word, is more blessed than the one needing a sign. As it is written, then he said to Thomas, reach here with your finger and see my hands, and reach here your hand and put it into my side, and do not be unbelieving, but believing. Thomas answered and said to him, my Lord and my God. Jesus said to him, because you have seen me, have you believed? Blessed are they who do not see, or did not see, and yet believed. John 20:27 through 29. A miracle or sign is a piece of cake. What's really hard is taking the small steps of obedience to God on a daily basis, even when no one is looking. Which brings us to divorce. Except for adultery, there is no good reason to divorce, according to Jesus, and even adultery is not open and shut. But that didn't stop men in the hardness of their hearts from pursuing wrongness. Matthew 19:3, Mark 10:2. As we already noticed, God never approved divorce, and the law didn't give permission either. It was allowed because of hard hearts only. Sometimes it might be the only thing to do. Other times it might be beyond one's control. That still doesn't mean it is a good thing. Leaders looked at the law and decided that divorce for any reason was okay, just because there was no rule saying don't do it, at least for the hard-hearted. As it is written, this is another thing you do. You cover the altar of the Lord with tears, with weeping and with groaning, because he no longer regards the offering or accepts it with favor from your hand. Yet you say, for what reason? Because the Lord has been a witness between you and the wife of your youth, against whom you have dealt treacherously, though she is your companion and your wife by covenant. But not one has done so who has a remnant of the Spirit. And what did that one do while he was seeking a godly offspring? Take heed then to your spirit, and let no one deal treacherously against the wife of your youth. For I hate divorce, says the Lord, the God of Israel, and him who covers his garment with wrong, says the Lord of hosts. So take heed to your spirit that you do not deal treacherously. Malachi 2:13 through 16. This highlights one of the reasons for the law in the first place. Instead of following what God says from the heart, in the spirit with love, we look for any excuse to express our sin. Marriage is by vows. Jesus tells us in other places that God will require us to answer for our broken ones. What the people testing Jesus were really saying is that they had given themselves permission to sin and wanted Jesus to keep them off the hook. Instead, Jesus trumps their not quite law card and hooks them with his own actual law card, which is the original pattern of one male and one female. This heart response should have told them all they needed to know about divorce. Love does not divorce. So the next test is paying taxes to Caesar. Matthew 22:15 through 22 and Mark 12:15. Was a no-brainer. except the leaders knew that Roman rule was grating on the people and the tax system was corrupt. Gee, our current systems aren't unique. So popular feeling, they probably thought, would be on their side, and they wanted an excuse to arrest Jesus for dodging taxes. He very practically reminds them that God had decreed the times of the Gentiles, Daniel 9 through 11, because Israel wouldn't obey him. God is the one who sets up rulers and pulls them down. Isaiah 40:23, Daniel 4:17 and 25, Jeremiah 18:7 through 10. So if Israel found itself in the hands of another kingdom, where they were dispersed, Ezra 9:7, they had to follow that kingdom's laws. Romans 13:1 through 2. Rebellion is not a good idea when it is directed at God's will. Money made by governments represents authority given to them by God. To pay taxes to the government, render what is Caesar's to Caesar, was to acknowledge its authority to govern. A negative answer could have caused more rebellion or killed the leader. But Jesus used it instead as an object lesson in submitting to God's will. That coin, Matthew 22:19, in my opinion, was a symbol, another sign they refused to see, of Israel's rebellion and God's discipline. Israel resented the rule of Gentiles who didn't use the law and worshipped man as a god. But the heart of their problem was actually with God and his law. It was God who consigned them to their fate for violating his laws. The solution was to submit to God in everything. They could have avoided the Romans by submitting to God in the first place. In a way, the coin showed God's will. It served to inflame their hatred because hate filled them. The coin reminded them that God was always going to have his way, one way or the other. The greatest command, mentioned in Matthew 22:34 through 40 and Luke 10:25 through 29, had general agreement at the time. So this test question seems to have been more of an effort to make sure Jesus knew the set answer. Surely the rabbis knew the answer, and the smallest child able to walk or talk would know too. In modern schools, it is standard to ask questions to make sure the student understands the right answers. I found in public schooling, and I've heard the same thing from others, that the teacher didn't want an answer. He or she wanted me to parrot their answer. They wanted to teach me what to think, to indoctrinate. I had to learn how to think from other sources, although, to be fair, some teachers really do try to teach how to think. So I learned to give the teachers what they wanted and pass their tests. This may have been the same with Jesus at this point, too. It just so happens that in this case, the answer the leaders wanted was also the correct answer. So Jesus passes, sort of. He still got crucified. Sadly, the religious leaders may have had the right answer on their lips, to love God, but they sure didn't have it in their heart. So now we come to the stoning of the adulteress. John 8:1 through 11. This was a harder test to me because there is more law that comes to bear on the subject. Some people think this section wasn't in the original manuscripts. Some think it is true even if not in the original. I don't think it matters because understood in the context of the whole word, it still fits in with all the other teachings of Jesus. Did Jesus nullify the law as the church teaches from this, or is there more going on? Did Jesus say no one can judge anyone else because everyone has sinned? If he did, does that mean that each person has the right to do whatever is right in their own eyes? I say no, and I think the scriptural position is also no. There is more going on here than is apparent, especially if we don't know the law. The only fact of the case given to Jesus was that the woman was caught in the act of adultery. This means having sex with a man who was not her husband. If she was caught in the very act, isn't there a party to the proceedings that is missing? Like, hello, the man? Shouldn't he have been part of the festivities? Read Deuteronomy 22:23 through 29 for instruction on catching someone in the act. In fact, it was par for the course for leaders to blame the woman only. In many cultures, even today, the woman is blamed for provoking men to lust. This is false. Men lust all by themselves. Oh, sure, a woman should be modest, and if caught in the act, should be punished right along with her partner. But in this case, that wasn't happening as it should. 2 or more witnesses are required for any offense, especially any capital offense, and they are not supposed to bear false witness. Exodus 20:16, 23:1 and 7, Deuteronomy 5:20, Deuteronomy 19:15 through 21. If they did, they got the same punishment as the accused would have gotten. Exodus 21:14, Leviticus 24:19, and Deuteronomy 19:18 through 19. The witnesses are also supposed to be the first to cast stones after a conviction is legally, according to Torah, obtained. So if they were legally correct, Jesus says, go for it. This is the main reason why Jesus says, he who is without sin cast the first stone. Since the man was missing, and since caught in the act was a little suspicious, unless the two had sold tickets, then the testimony was very likely false. If there were witnesses to the very act, then their first act was to stop it. Instead, they grab the woman only and take her to a kangaroo court. As it is written, you shall not bear a false report. Do not join your hand with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. Exodus 23:1. See also Exodus 20:16 and Deuteronomy 5:20. And again, on the evidence of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses, he who is to die shall be put to death. He shall not be put to death on the evidence of 1 witness. The hand of the witnesses shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. Deuteronomy 17:6 through 7. And see also Numbers 35:30. The issue was equal justice according to Torah. It wasn't to shove the law out of the way. And speaking of kangaroos, it doesn't appear that the court here had been convened according to Torah, and they were being way too quick in jumping to a conclusion. There are elders that are supposed to judge these matters. The mob might have been a group of elders, but it doesn't seem like it from the text. Even if it was, they would have to be the elders designated for hearing cases, not just any person walking by on the street. Leviticus 19:15 through 18. We are also not privy to other factors. Were the alleged adulterers caught in the city or in the country? Was she a virgin? Did she fight or cry out? But Jesus, in a masterful stroke, gathers all of these questions together with one statement: he who is without sin. In other words, if you follow Torah, start checking. Obviously, there were lots of Torah sections ignored by the accusers, many of which were even more important than the issue of adultery. No one in the mob was following the law. They were acting on their own. This is also against the law. Leviticus 19:15 through 19. It wasn't that Jesus was being all that sympathetic to the woman. He wasn't thinking of some lame idea that we all sin, so she couldn't be punished. Of course she could have been punished if, in fact, justice, following Torah, were the issue. She was evidently guilty, but there was enough doubt that capital punishment could not be administered legally. Justice obviously wasn't a concern of the mob. Due to the number of laws broken, the statement of Jesus brought everyone up short. If they had kept going, they would have been subject to the death penalty also. That is why the mob backs off. In all this testing, did you notice that Jesus never said, "Don't worry about this, the law is going away"? Not once. In fact, he kept using the law in order to correct the false teachings. Wouldn't it have been easier to just wave his magic wand and make it all go away? Easier, perhaps. Instead, he kept going back to what God had been saying all along. Many other examples of Jesus fulfilling the law revolve around traditions, not the law itself. Plucking heads of grain, for instance, Matthew 12, Mark 2, Luke 6, was allowed. Deuteronomy 23, 24, and 25, because making a meal was allowed on Sabbath. Exodus 16:25. The leaders had wrongly classified plucking grain as work, which was banned on Sabbath. Healing on the Sabbath, Matthew 12, Mark 6, Luke 6, 13, 14, John 5, and eating with unwashed hands, Matthew 15 and Mark 7, were never banned by God. But the rabbis, for the sake of their authority, set aside God's word on a regular basis with rulings like these. As time went by, the rulings became a heavy yoke. In contrast, the yoke of Jesus, Matthew 11, 29 and 30, which is his law, is light and easy. So thanks for watching. A draft of our book is available on our website, www.wholebible.com, if you'd like to see it all written out. Subscribe to our channel, please, and register on our blog if you want to comment. Shalom.